I want you to sit back, close your eyes, and imagine for one moment that you're a bright young person with your entire life ahead of you. Imagine that with the support of your loving family behind you, your faith in God and in the Catholic Church spurring you onward, and the pull of a promising future secured at no financial cost to you or your family, dragging you away from hearth and home, at just 15 years old, you place your trust in total strangers and leave your hometown far behind. It's a matter of a lack of things that brings you to this point. A lack of opportunities in your region, a lack of financial largesse on the part of your family, a lack of access to any number of things, and education being a big one, and ultimately a lack of true informed consent on your part. And this lack creates an opportunity that, unbeknownst to you, is seized upon by fanatics with severely impaired moral compasses. From their point of view, almost anything is permissible in their effort to retrieve dirty, denigrated children from the fringes of society in order to deliver their eternal souls unto God and their eternal servitude to the fanatics' organization. But you don't learn about that until promises have already been made and ties to your former life and family have been neatly severed. I will never forget the way that I felt the day that I stumbled upon accounts of experiences just like what I have described here. Testimonies that had been posted as long ago as the decade that I was born and as recently as just a few years back, all from women who had been young girls and who all told the same story of grooming, love bombing, coercion, abuse, and enslavement within an organization that everyone seems to have heard of and yet no one seems to actually understand. I will never forget. Do you know what human trafficking actually looks like? Because I do. And if you want to know the truth, the tragedy that has befallen these women, the lives that they have lost, and the scars that they carry has left an immense impression on me, to the point that I have been unable to step away from it all since. But through it all, I have learned that it is not all doom and gloom, although these testimonies are emerging from the darkest of places, that I can assure you. Survivors of abuse, any type of abuse, are lights in the darkness, and every story told and receives brightens the glow just a little bit more. Abuse thrives in darkness, but truth creates a light that no one can fully extinguish, although efforts have been made and are ongoing. Survivors are the source of the illumination, and if you want to know where the end of the tunnel is, where the daylight will penetrate, you can stop looking. It's right here, within these people, in every testimony and in every story shared. So there are a number of reasons why I am so happy to be sharing this conversation with you today. I should warn you, parts of this may be hard to hear, but if you can, try to bear it and listen. The listening matters just as much as the telling. My name is Beck Griffin. Welcome to the Deep Dive Project. For those of my audience who are meeting you for the first time, would you care to just introduce yourself a little bit?
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Well, my name is Anne-Marie Allen. I'm a former assistant numerary. I suppose in the course of the interview, I'll be referring to myself as a former NAX. I think, that kind of comes out as part of the internal language of Opus Dei, which is the Latin, it's the short for the Latin numerary auxiliar. I first came in contact with Opus Dei at the age of 15. And I left when I was 22. But I was born in the UK and I was reared in Mid-Cork, which is in the south of Ireland. I was supposed to train to become a chef in a centre of Opus Dei. I started off a catering course in Ballyglunin in Tuam, County Galway, which was run by Opus Dei. So yeah, I became an assistant numerary, and I left when I was 22. And the story really starts, I think, when I first came in contact with Opus Dei.
Would you describe for me your experience growing up in Ireland, the culture at the time that you were growing up, and the role that all sort of played in priming you to be recruited into Opus Dei? Because I think the cultural component is a really important one.
Yes, for sure. So I was born in the UK. I was the eldest of three, and we were a Catholic family. Both my parents were born Irish but worked in the UK. So I came to Ireland when I was 8. And we're in England. I was part of a Catholic family, but in Ireland, the culture then was hugely Catholic. You lived, breathed, everything revolved around the Catholic Church. I went to national school, and then I went to secondary school, and just what isn't in the book is that maybe there's a hint of it, but that there was some dysfunction in my family, which made me vulnerable, therefore made me very attractive to Opus Dei. The dysfunction the book isn't about the dysfunction. The book is about the exploitation of a vulnerable child to become a servant in this organization. So I was ripe for the picking. I think I wanted a better life for myself. No, there wasn't. I did. I wanted a better life for myself. I wanted to be a good person. All of that was decided before I ever came in contact with Opus Dei. But Opus Dei sniffed that out. They knew from the moment they met me that there was dysfunction in my family, and immediately they moved in, and they told my parents that I would be safe, that I would be treated well, and my parents thought that I was going to get this massive qualification and go on and become a chef. But my father was an intelligent, well-read man, but even I would say, he was groomed. He was manipulated as well. Now he obviously that obviously changed as I came towards the end of my time with Opus Dei. But in those early days, yeah. So I was very attracted to what they were going to give me on the course, and I wanted to go. They saw that, and they saw the dysfunction, and they said I was ripe for the picking.
And I also think that there was an element of this sort of inherent respect for authority that's part of being a Catholic, just in general. And when you're in such a Catholic culture, that's going to seep into every single interaction, how you approach situations like the one that you found yourself in. So I have to think that there was just a lack of thought to question certain things because the individuals presenting themselves to you and your family appeared so self-assured and credible and authentic that possibility that it could just be fraud didn't even cross your mind.
Absolutely, it didn't cross my parents' mind. They were very articulate. They were well presented, and they were very interested in my parents and very interested in me. I mean, I had never been spoken to or addressed like that before. I mean, they told me how lovely I was and my beautiful smile, and all those kind of things. And I'm sure I had never been treated like this before. That was the start of the grooming process.
The love bombing.
The love bombing, 100%. So then and my parents, my mother did question it with one of the, I think it is in the book. And he said that he felt that Opus Dei were a very good organization. And he said, if anything goes wrong, I'll be around. There was no sign of him when things went wrong. But anyway, my mother did. There was a little bit of questioning, but overall, I think it all changed when my parents went to Ballyglunin and they saw it. And I mean, it was this lovely house, and it was so clean, and everyone was so nice. And I mean, the charm was rolled out. And looking back, my mother was brought into one room, my father was brought somewhere else, I was brought somewhere else. My mother was very impressed that the television was locked behind a press, a cupboard with it. I always remember there was a key in it with a gold tassel. And Dallas was the big program at the time. And my mother, they were saying she won't be watching Dallas because it's immoral. And my mother was delighted with this. When you go back to the bite model, that's it's the behavior control, it's the thought control, that was
Information
easy.
control for sure, because you were not getting the whole picture.
You're not getting the whole picture. So yeah, so that was even before I went there. So there was a lot of chess pieces moved before I even went there. And I went there, I left school, and the extended family were not happy. My grandmother and my aunts, they were not happy at all. But my parents were saying she will get a job. There was a very high unemployment rate in Ireland at the time, and this was the sweetener, really, Rebecca, that I would get a good job at the end of it. And everyone else was leaving Ireland. They were going to the UK, they were going to America, they were going to Canada, immigrating to Canada, and so on. And my parents were saying she'd get a good job in Ireland and she won't have to emigrate. And I was going to get pocket money of £5 a week. So that was, so my parents were saying she's going to get a job. The rest of them won't get jobs, but she'll get a job. And there was no job at the end. The job would have been in an Opus Dei centre. That was the thing. So
you had ambitions, you had dreams, you talked about in your book wanting to go to study cookery skills in London, to go and become a chef in London. You had an aptitude for it as well, clearly, that you'd picked up from working in the hotel in your hometown. So I have always thought that one of the most disgusting things about the entire recruitment process is how it preys on idealism and the innate natural abilities that people have, those innate skills. And that ends up being taken and twisted and turned towards a purpose that, you never intended for it to be turned towards. And
yeah.
I definitely picked up on that reading your book. And then as well, it's very clear that from the moment you made contact with these women from this school, that you entered a system, so to speak, where there was a very planned, coordinated, and premeditated course of action that was taken to get you into the school, to answer the questions that your parents would have, to convince you to spend time there and to stay there, even as you started to notice that things were not quite on the up and up, that you weren't getting what you'd been promised. That all came through so clearly. And I think this would be the perfect time to start talking about, once you were in that situation and in the Opus Dei houses, what the day-to-day life was like, because I think that is something for the assistant numeraries. It's very important to shine a light on that as much as possible, because it's one thing to say someone was labor trafficked, or someone was deprived of wages, but what that actually looks like, how it is carried out in the day to day, how it makes the individual, you who's going through it, feel. I would love to hear all of that from you, because I think that is really important.
Okay, well, I think one of the most important thing was my parents dropped me off at the school. And the grooming process started more or less straight away. They went out the gate, and looking back, the contact with my parents was minimal enough. They promised letters and they promised all kinds of things. So that was, I think it was October. It was the day after Pope John Paul II was elected. Okay,
Wow.
so it was the following day. So it was the 16th or the 17th of October 1978. I think. And my parents went out the gate, and I wouldn't have been seeing my parents till December. There was no weekends home. There was nothing like that. And from that day until I went home at Christmas, I worked from 8 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night. Midterm break, there was no midterm break, everything. So that night, it's in the book, we were all brought into the sitting room for this get together that every centre of Opus Dei has every night from 9 until 9:30, or 9 until 9:45. And immediately, they started to tell us who they were, that they were numeraries in Opus Dei, that this was a centre of Opus Dei, and started to tell us about the founder. And he had died on the 26th of June 1975, and he was only dead a short while, but he was going to be made a saint. And they showed it. They passed around Noticias, the magazine,
Yes.
and the internal magazine for the fee. And we had look. So that was it. It had started already, and they were so nice to us and so friendly for the first while.
Yeah.
We all were appointed tutors to help us with our studies. but essentially they were our recruiter, all right.
And this was
Which
the
is
person that you would have been having your spiritual direction with as well?
that when I joined Opus Dei, that person was my spiritual director. But at the
Interesting.
time when we went in, they were to help us with our studies, but there was no studies, there was no cookery, there was no curriculum, there was no timetable. There was, what was interesting, just I suppose, just a visual of the centre. There was no pictures of past students.
Mm-hmm.
There was no history. It was all, there was no, there was a class that left last year and
No
they went on.
graduating classes, no awards, no
Nothing,
recognition.
nothing like that. And the reason was because they had all left.
Hmm.
That's what it was. And they couldn't say, oh, a class came in, they were here for a year and they all left. And that's what, and that's what I saw in my own time. We might talk about it in a while, but just, so then the work day then started, the work started that evening, and this is all about providing free work.
Yeah.
This is all this is about. The norms, the mortification, all of that was the control methods. But it was all about getting free work. And I was only 15. So the work started that evening. We went over and we had to cook the supper. We had to lay the table for the numeraries. We had to lay the table for ourselves. And at the time, the same food was put out, but it was a class system already in place. And I remember saying, this is a bit weird. This is a bit off. So there was silver platters, silver teapots, little Waterford glass butter dishes for the numeraries. And then we were in this dingy dining room. And they went into their world and they took on this whole new aura when they went in there, into this dining room. And then we went into ours and then we came out, and I remember what was left over was put into a plastic container, and that food then was to be used for our food for the next day. I mean, there was never any waste, but the policy was that the students and the assistant numeraries ate the leftovers, you know. So our work. So the following day, we were then assigned. I went to Girthard, which is a male student residence in Salt Hill, which at that point was about a half hour's drive from Ballyglunan. There was three of us selected. I was 15. I wasn't the youngest. I just leave it at that. I leave it at I leave it at that. I wasn't the youngest, and the three of us had hospitality experience. We'd worked in hotels, and we were put into this green bus that we called Betsy. We nicknamed the bus Betsy, and we were driven by a numerary into the male student residence, and we were told about how we were to behave, the timetable. So we started, we'd clean this men's residence, their bedrooms, the oratory, the sitting rooms. We would cook their breakfast, their dinner, and their tea, and their late night supper. We'd waitress them, and I worked in a prison afterwards, for 30 years afterwards. But just the locking system between the male residents and the female residents was as sophisticated, if not more sophisticated, than anything I've experienced in a prison. Yeah. So there was two locks on either side. The keys were held on the director and the directress. There was a phone call made when they were going to open them or unlock them. And then they'd come in, and then the doors would be unlocked, and we would go through to the male residence at certain times to clean. And we cleaned one part of it for an hour, I think. And that would be like hoovering, washing floors, cleaning bathrooms. But I mean, not just a little dust around. This was heavy manual work where there was a backstairs. We lugged laundry baskets, laundry, hoovers, buckets of water, cleaning equipment, in silence. We couldn't talk in case we disturbed the men. They were in some room locked somewhere. And then there was a changeover, and we went to another part of the residence, and we cleaned that again in silence. And then we'd come down, phone call made, locking system applied. And then we got ready for lunch. One of us served, the other one cooked, and the other one did the laundry. I mean, this was
Unrelenting.
unrelenting. And that was just as a student, okay? That was just as a student. I went there in October 1978, and by April 1979, I had whistled, as they say, or I had joined Opus Dei as an assistant numerary. Yeah. And there was a whole long journey in between that, which is in the book, yeah.
Mm. Yeah, you talk about the protocols and procedures that you had to follow for going over into the men's section of these
Mm.
houses and everything. You were under, strict silence. You didn't were not allowed to speak. You were not allowed to make eye contact. No sort of like human interaction whatsoever at any point. You actually, in your book, you describe a situation where you and one of the female numeraries, I assume, came around the corner and a male student was coming down the way and she completely lost it. Would you describe that?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think I'll ever forget it. I don't think he was a member of Opus Dei, but he was under strict instructions that if he saw any of us, we were informed that the students are told that as well. They're not to talk to you, not to look at you, and they're not to say thank you to you. Imagine a basic courtesy of thank you, or even a nod and acknowledgement, nothing. So I remember one day, we were going, I think, up the back stairs of Gerthard, and there was a back door there, and it opened, and there was this male, and I mean, the man nearly died. I mean, it was just a simple,
Wow.
and the numerary just, yeah, she just, oh my God, this was, and I think we went back in, or did we go back up? I can't remember, but we got out of there straight away. And that's just because he opened up a door. I mean, it was bizarre,
There's
bizarre.
like such a total distrust of any type of like normal human interaction that seems to be sown through everyone's experiences with this organization. Those of you who lived and worked so closely to it, it's something that I kind of kept pick up on throughout every single one of these stories and testimonies, and it's really interesting. I have to think that it's just another control mechanism, another way to isolate the individual and make it to where that individual, isn't going to think about reaching out to another person for any type of like collaboration or help, or even to compare notes maybe about the experience that they're having, because that would all be very detrimental to what they are trying to accomplish.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's just a normal interaction between males and females just didn't happen. I mean, it was just, you know, um, even when the priest came into the residence or came into the center, it was through the confessional that you spoke to him. There was no big chat or nothing, not even a hello. There was the Opus Dei greeting, which is Pax in Aeternam, but that
Mhm.
was it. The director was the only one allowed to speak to you in the dining room, and if any of the men wanted something, it came to the director. But it was just, we need butter, we need extra bread. There was no please or thank you. I mean, it was just, I mean, normal interaction just didn't happen, and I mean, I think that the overriding thing was that it was to control the sexuality, the
Of all
the
these young people.
all these young people, yeah. And I mean, it was no, it was just crazy, crazy, yeah.
Mhm. You also, we discussed this previously, you and I, the what you witnessed when you were serving these individuals and doing their laundry and making their meals. You saw these students being put through a recruitment process. You saw we should get into what you saw manifesting in people's like health and everything as well while they're in this environment, because that's huge as well. Take us through that a little bit.
Okay, first of all, yeah. So I was being recruited myself, and then I was recruited, and then I witnessed. I could see my other uh, girls on the course, my peers being recruited as well, and I was part of that recruitment because I was
Mhm.
the assistant numerary, um, and so that was very hard to watch. And then I would be, so I saw this quite a lot when I was in the male residence. We'll say in October, when the new academic year started in the university, the centre would be full of young men starting the first year in university.
Mhm.
And it would be everyone would be, delighted. You could sense the energy in the room. But then as time went on, the students left bit by bit,
Mm.
you know and then the people, then you could feel after not didn't take long, after a few weeks, you'd hear the discontent, you'd hear the questioning, and next thing somebody would be gone. Next thing, the ones that stayed, you'd see them changing. They'd
Mhm.
change their dress, they changed the way they looked at you. I remember one particular, they dress older, like young men smoking a pipe,
Yes.
this, and next thing you realized, they were in, that they had been recruited, they had become a member of Opus Dei. So that was, traumatic to watch. I worked in a conference centre then where people came in for the weekend or for a week to do a retreat or whatever. And when it was non-Opus Dei, the same dynamics happened.
Mm.
I remember one day there was a retreat on for a group of people, and there was so many stayed on the Friday night, and by lunchtime on the Saturday, half of them were gone. And this was
Wow.
common, and you could, and you witnessed it, and it was never said, there was never anything. But when you're a member of Opus Dei and you were witnessing that, in a way, it was a huge conflictual feelings. Really, you were jealous that they had the cop on to go. You were so sad that they left as well. You were kind of thinking that there was something wrong with them that they
Yeah.
didn't see. So there was these, very mixed feelings.
Mm.
Yeah, as well as you were dealing with your own trauma, and then you were dealing with the trauma of the people that you're actually living with.
Mm-hmm.
I think I might have said to you before, I was going through my own trauma. There was a kind of a cycle
Yeah.
where I was happy with my vocation. Wouldn't be very for very long now, but it might be for a couple of days. We say, okay, this is my vocation. I'm going to live with it.
Mm.
God has chosen me, so that might be for a couple of days. And next thing, you start to get fanatical. Go through where you're following the norms and you're doing everything. And next thing, that just gets too much, and you break down and you start crying and you get very emotional, and then you're numb. And next thing, you go back into, this is my vocation. So I was going
Wow.
through that constantly. And I think you see it in my book, the day that I threw the Battenberg cakes all over the place up against the wall.
Mm-hmm.
There was a few things like that, but that was just pure grief. I think grief surrounded me. I was grieving for the life I left.
And
I was grieving.
for you, what you thought that you were going to be getting, the opportunity.
Yeah, I was grieving for my family. I was
Mm-hmm.
grieving for my friends. I was grieving for the dreams that were
Mm-hmm.
taken away from me. I was grieving for the children I would never have.
Mm-hmm.
I was grieving, so there was grief surrounding me. And looking back, my peers, my sisters in Opus Dei were the same. So I was going through mine, and there was other people going through theirs. And I think it's in the book. There was the people with the red cheeks. You
Yes.
know, uh, the red cheeks. The next thing you see somebody, and they'd be very quiet, and they'd be washing the dishes, and they'd have red cheeks. And next thing they'd be in the oratory praying, and next thing they'd be in the director's office, and next thing they'd disappear for a day, and next thing somebody from the advisory would come and visit them, and next thing you get up one morning, they were gone. Not a word spoken, nothing said. And next thing the directors would say, and there would be an empty chair at the dining room table. That was very hard to take. And that person's name was never mentioned. And I remember things would be said, she chose to live an immoral life.
The lies that you all were told so consistently, and that like from the very first word of interaction all the way through to the end, the lies that you were all told that were intended, I think, just to keep you locked in your place. It was just lie after lie after lie.
Yeah, it's thought control. It's using loaded language. I have it written down here, to shut down any critical thinking. It was enforced, enforced thought control.
Mhm.
And again, I remember when those people left, you were jealous of them because they were free.
Yeah.
you know you were sad for them because they must be suffering, and then you were thinking that you were praying for them because you thought they were going to go to hell. So it was these hugely conflictual emotions, that were going on, and some of those people were beautiful, fabulous people
I
and
have
good people.
I believe it. I believe it. I haven't met a single former member of this organization I haven't been completely blown away by the strength and the intelligence and the charisma of these individuals. You guys are so strong. I am so
Mm,
sorry that this happened
mm,
to you. You didn't deserve it,
yeah,
and it wasn't right.
yeah.
But the fact that you are speaking truth to power now, turning that experience into something that can help other people is incredible. And I feel it. I feel it in my heart. And I want you to know that your words are having impact and that they are touching people's lives. And I do believe they will make a difference.
Absolutely, 100%. We have to keep speaking. We have to keep telling our stories. And I say in the book, this isn't my story. This is the story of thousands. There's thousands of us. And I suppose I'm speaking specifically about the assistant numeraries. You know, the numeraries had their experience. The males and the females had their experiences. Um, the associates, I mean, I watched the documentary, the HBO documentary, and I really picked up on the horrible lives the associates had. Are you okay? Are
Yes,
you okay?
yes, yes,
Okay,
yes. You moved me to tears, but I'm okay.
okay, okay. I was going to say, I have a tissue.
I'll take
Okay.
that.
But the supernumeraries, the priests as well, the ones that left, and the children then. I mean, so, but I suppose I'm speaking specifically because I really see this as a human rights abuse of females, of
Mm.
children, female children. Just for the sole purpose of cleaning, providing a free cleaning service. I think it's a serious human rights breach. Yes, absolutely.
It's not just to provide a cleaning service either. There are so many layers. It was to provide a
Yeah,
cleaning service under the guise of a vocation that you were informed of, that you had, not something that you discerned yourself between yourself, your family, and your spiritual guidance, but you were informed of it once you got to that place. Oh, you have a vocation. And by the way, if you don't live out your vocation, your family members and the people that you care about and you yourself will suffer tremendously. So there's a through line. Again, we have these threads that are weaving through this whole thing.
yeah,
There's a through line of fear that is like wrapped around every single individual from the very beginning.
yeah, 150%. So, I know we've kind of gone forward a bit, but just to go back to my recruitment,
Mm.
I was told that that an incident had happened, I think, where some stuff had gone missing uh, in
Yes.
the college, and the finger was pointed at me,
Yeah.
um, and it was tough. The times were tough. I had very, very little, and stuff had gone missing belonging to me. But anyway, the finger was pointed at me, and I was just. I had never been in trouble before. I didn't know how to handle it. So I remember saying to one of the others, and this numerary said it to me. This is, this. If we find that you are the thief, we will send you home. No one will want you. And so I realized afterwards, this is the line that's churned out all the time. But I didn't realize that at the time. So she told me that a letter had come from from our priest at home to say that, that, that I had was a well-known thief in my village. Like, so that couldn't possibly be true. So I said to one of the other students, "What?" She said, "Go to the priest and ask him." So I went to the priest, who was he was an Opus Dei priest. I said, "Did you get a letter?" And he said, "I did." And he said, the priest said that you were a very good person. You came from a very good family and were to look after you. But I
Oh,
realized afterwards that this narrative, that sometimes the directors are told that God works through them, so they
yeah.
feel they've the God-given right. There was no investigation. There was nothing like that. My parents weren't contacted. There was nothing like that. And I had never been in trouble before. And my parents were the type, if you were in trouble, they'd be very cross, like, and you'd be blamed. But I didn't. I
Mhm.
didn't ring, and we didn't have a phone at home at the time, and it was so. Anyway, I dealt with it myself as a 15-year-old. I
Oh,
dealt with this myself. Looking back, I mean, if I'd rang my dad would have gone nuts. But anyway, and that was possibly my biggest mistake. I didn't tell my dad. But what happened then was that I started to fawn to Opus Dei because they were very cool with me. They
mm.
were very. So I was saying, I started, what's Opus Dei, and what are you, and tell us about the founder. They had me then.
Interesting.
So
So it's almost as if, and I didn't even pick up on that in the book, but
yeah,
they created a crisis, fabricated a crisis in order to nudge you along towards
No, I
maybe?
don't think they did. I think what happened was that, well, I think that this crisis, there was always a crisis, just that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but anyway, this was a particular crisis, and the finger was pointed at me. But my way of coping with it was to fawn to them. And in the fawning, then they said, okay. They started then, they said, oh, she's interested in. So I started to, they separated me from my peers. Now, regarding the whatever went missing, all I can say is that personnel changed, and that's all I can say is that the personnel changed, and I think it was kind of obvious what was happening, and I'll just leave it at that. All
Mm-hmm.
right. Um, so, but then it was too late, because they had me in their grasp.
Yeah.
I wanted to be liked, so they separated me from my peers. They started bringing me, my tutor started bringing me on little walks, smiling at me, little private jokes. I mean, it was flirtatious.
Mm-hmm.
It was wrong on every level. You know, we had little jokes, and I thought I was amazing. I thought I was very special. And so, and the others were getting jealous. And next thing, I was brought to Rome, and of course I joined Opus Dei there. From the time that I was accused, no, I wasn't accused, but it was said to me, "We think you are the thief." From
Yeah.
the moment that happened until the moment that I joined, I think it was maybe about 8 weeks, maybe. So it
Wow.
was all very quick, yeah. It was very consistent and steady, but quick. Um, and what's interesting is now I can look back, and that was April, May, June, July of that year. Then I got the shingles. Yeah. So I was under huge pressure. I
Mm.
was under huge pressure. I was told at that time not to tell my parents I was joining Opus Dei. They wouldn't understand our ways. You know, the usual, the information control, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and the thought control came in, there. So, and from the moment they started to groom me, my letters and my phone calls were monitored. I was asked about what we're speaking about, and with my parents, and my letter, and asked what was in my letters. They didn't take my letters until I had actually joined Opus Dei. But yeah, so it was all very quick. I was the first one on my course to join. At that stage, we started off on the course with maybe 10. By the time I joined, there was 4 of us left, and 2 of us became assistant numeraries.
Wow.
Yeah. 3 of us finished in the end out of the 10 after the 2 years. Yeah.
You know, and it's one thing to look back on it all retrospectively now and say, you know, I'm pointing out these things and I can see these themes and I understand how this was twisted and used, but when you're going through that in the moment, it's so incredibly bewildering. And I am sure you never feel like you're on solid ground. You probably never feel like you don't know what's coming next. It could be good, it could be bad, but you have no control over your autonomy at that point, and you're just kind of at the mercy of this system that you've now become a part of, living out this cycle that you now go through as this member, trying to deal with this vocation that you've now
Yeah.
been given.
Yeah. And keep in mind as well that we were exhausted.
Yeah.
You know, I was a 16-year-old girl working, you know, a 13-hour day. You know, never allowed to sleep in. You know, so there was no thought. There was no time to think. You know,
And sleep
so
deprivation is a technique that is used by, the military uses it
yeah,
to make people easier to interrogate. It's a tried and true technique. You deprive a person of sleep, then their cognitive function and everything else is going to be that much more impaired. And it makes a person much more pliable and easy to deal with.
yeah, 150%. You know, and so I got the shingles in July, and I remember my mother was a nurse,
Mm.
and I was told not to tell my parents. I'd worry them. So I know if I had said to my mum I had shingles, she would have brought me home, and I would have rested
Yeah.
for 3 months at least. You know, but you know what? The only compensation that I got was that they kept me. I didn't have to go to Garthard. I could stay in Ballyglunin and work in Ballyglunin, which was a busy conference centre. And I kept working during that time. No sleep, no extra rest, nothing. Um, yeah, and it was an Opus Dei doctor prescribed the medication for me and all that. And my parents, I remember going home for a week, I think, and I told my parents then, and my mother was horrified, but not, it was done then. I had it
Yeah.
then, and so, but it was the following October that I was given. When I think of it, it's only, I was still, I suppose, had the shingles, but I was given the chain and the whip.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, the mortifications, and then also the immense physical pressure that you and these other individuals were under, what that did to you physically, because you may be able to deny that something is happening in your own mind, but the body knows, the body keeps the score. The body knows what's going on and will try to alert you. And you talk about that in your book, these symptoms and things that started coming up.
When you become an assistant numerary, your work is to create beautiful homes and care for the or for the members of Opus Dei.
Mm.
So, and there's huge emphasis on the little things and reaching perfection in your everyday life and in your work.
Yeah.
So so you're under huge pressure to do everything quickly to the highest standard. So you were so, as I said, we cooked beautiful meals, we served them, we cleaned the residences thoroughly. And I mean, as I said, it wasn't just a light little dusting, it was lifting heavy furniture. It was like a deep clean every single day.
You were on your hands and knees, correct?
It was on my hands and knees making beds. I walked on my knees making beds. So in the students' rooms, there was always an odd number. So there was either, or in the men's bedrooms, if there was more than, if it was a multiple bedroom, so you couldn't have even numbers in a bedroom,
Mm.
or so it was either 1, 3, or 5. So in those rooms, I'd walk on my knees making the beds and tucking in the corners, and I'd walk on my knees brushing down the stairs. So sometimes it was better. It was seen as when you did stuff by hand, that for some reason it was better work and closer to God.
Ah, interesting.
You know, yeah, that. So I started to suffer with my knees. I got fluid on my knees. It remained untreated, so much so that I've got rheumatoid arthritis on my knees now. And a doctor said to me recently, where did that come? And I said, well, for 5 years, I walked on my knees making beds and brushing down stairs and brushing carpets, brushing the fringes of carpets, so that they're straight on your knees, and, you washing a floor, you had to scrub it. You had to, scrub it hard. And so it was physically hugely demanding. You're on your feet all the time. And then you had to mortify yourself as well. So you'd be wearing the chain for minimum 2 hours a day. Sometimes that was increased, depending, and we'll talk about the spiritual direction later.
Yeah.
And you'd be wearing this chain and you'd be lugging vacuum cleaners up the stairs and buckets of water and laundry, and you'd be, on top of being exhausted and just on top of everything. So it was just completely overwhelming. So my health started to suffer very, very quickly. I started with shingles. I got, there was fluid on my knees. Mouth ulcers were constant, and nasal ulcers were constant.
Wow. I didn't even
Um,
know I didn't even know that you could get ulcers inside your
mm,
like sinuses.
yeah,
And what was
yeah.
that from?
Pure pressure, pure stress, pure stress. The constant pressure to perform to a very high standard. You were under pressure all the time. The men's laundry came down, they had 7 underpants, 7 shirts, 7 pairs of socks, and they all had to be separated, washed, ironed to perfection.
Mm.
It was a 3-minute shirt. You ironed a shirt in 3 minutes, and there was a way of folding it. It had to be 3 fingers on either side. It had to be, and you folded it, put it back into the laundry bag, there was a turnaround, I think, of 3 days. And then for the
Wow.
laundry alone, there was the men's laundry, there was their sheets, their towels, the oratory linen, their suits, they weren't sent out for dry cleaning. We got black vinegar, we brushed it down.
Wow.
with a brush, yeah, and you ironed, you ironed. So I know how to dry clean. I know how to dry clean suits. So, but all the oratory linen, there was a whole separate process for that because it was sacred,
Of
you
course.
know. And the alves, all that, and then there was all the table linen as well. So it was, and we were doing that as a student, but doing it as an assistant numerary as well. So yeah.
Yes.
The women's laundry was a bit different because it was a lot more delicate because it was silk blouses and cashmere sweaters and all that,
Mm.
and more delicate. And that took time and it took skill and all that. So then we had to clean the place and clean all the windows, and so it was constant. Yeah.
Wow. And I have to imagine you're dealing with some pretty harsh chemicals, pretty harsh like solvents. I mean, you mentioned black vinegar. I can't imagine that's a very gentle, gentle,
Mhm.
gentle substance. So I have to
Caustic
imagine,
soda.
yes,
Caustic
that,
soda. I got a hole in my eye from caustic soda unblocking the drains. We did little bits of maintenance. I remember there was a floor that we had to, rather than bring in a machine to strip this varnish off a floor,
mhm.
there was 5 assistant numeraries, and it went on for 3 days. We had no residents, we had no one on a course, and we in a row we got knives and we scraped the varnish off.
Wow, that is hard work.
Oh no, no, yeah, we were, yeah. There was 5 of us all in a row in our red uniforms, and we'd be saying the rosary, scraping it off. And I remember the varnish flying up into my eyes, and then we had to put polish on top of that and polish it up. But rather than pay somebody, we did that. We'd fix plugs, handles of doors. There was that light maintenance as well that we did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm.
And in your book you talk about how given, I mean, you were and you mentioned this just a moment ago, you're under a certain type of pressure. The male residents are under a different kind, the directors are under, everybody's kind of, and everybody's going through this cycle, and they're all at different points in this sort of freak out cycle. And so you got to see firsthand the impact that was having on these people because you're washing their linens and making their meals. And can you talk about like the pill cases and the diets and everything?
Yeah, 100%. So when you're cooking for the members of Opus Dei, you obviously got their diets, but there was a lot of them. I remember so many people were on a special diet because they had stomach ulcers.
Mm.
So I remember that. So we couldn't cook with certain butters and stuff like that. So there was a separate set of meals for them on top of the general food that we were cooking. And then I remember going to the dining. It was the first time I ever saw a pillbox. So you might have a table of 6 people. 3 of them would have a pillbox, and some of them were
Interesting.
many, many young men, and they'd have different sections and different tablets in it at every meal. Then there were the people then that had skin conditions. So we had special sheets for them that were washed separately because they had some type of emulant that they had to put on.
Mhm.
So we'd have to make sure that, and we call them by their initials, you know. So we'll say LC, that's LC sheets. They had to be, and his bed had to be made up with those sheets. And then you'd certain rooms, they would have to be really thoroughly hoovered because the dry skin would be on the carpet.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so that was just from serving the men and the men and the women in the dining room. The women, it wasn't as obvious, but definitely with the men. I never saw a pillbox after that. I ended up working with loads and loads of people afterwards, and when I worked for the Department of Justice here, and no one had the amount of illnesses that what I encountered when I was in Opus Dei, and then there was people that I was living with, again, it wasn't as obvious, but you could see it. There was a special diet, there was a special sheets, and then there was the people that went into their rooms and didn't come out for 3 days, and that was regular. They'd go in, you could see the red cheeks, and they go into the bedroom, and you'd have to pick up the slack for them. Nothing would be said. And next thing they'd emerge fanatical, hyper, and over the top happy. And but it was a regular, and very, very, and nothing said about it. And I think it has to be said. We were told that when you see one of your sisters suffering, don't say anything to them. I couldn't put my hand on their hand and say, "Are you okay?" That was banned. We couldn't do that. You were to go and tell the directors that I think, and it's an Irish term, she's in bad form, or she's in bad. That's the only thing you can do. You cannot address them, and do not address them. And I feel huge guilt over that, that I couldn't do that. And
Well,
there was
I mean,
people under
nobody
huge,
could.
no one, it's huge pressure that they were under, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And
nobody was able to function normally in that
no,
environment. And I think that again explains why you see stories about people behaving in strange ways, doing things that don't seem to make sense, acting against their own best interests. I mean, you don't just see that in high control groups. You see that in society at large. And a lot of the time, at least what I've kind of come to the conclusion, I think a lot of the time the reasoning behind that behavior is fear driven. There's a fear of some sort that is driving that behavior. And for you had this message that was constantly being reinforced that like you had to do these things to live up to this standard, or something terrible would happen. And you were a good Catholic girl. You believed that, and that was sewn into your spiritual direction and everything as well, which I think we should also talk about.
yeah, yeah. Go for the spiritual direction. So
Yeah,
the
I think so.
spiritual direction, there was a lot of spiritual direction, really. So we had, well, first of all, there was weekly confession, and then there was this separate chat with the priest, um,
Interesting.
which you just had a chat about things in life, which was unusual. And
Very.
then, then you had, I look back and I wonder about the purpose of that chat. And then I wonder if it remained confidential, and it was in the confessional. And then there was the chat with the spiritual directors.
Mm-hmm.
So you were assigned somebody, and that the first thing, because this is what Escriva said, the founder, that when we had that spiritual chat, it was to, and the first thing that we were to speak about was our impure thoughts. And they were paranoid about anything to do with emotions
Yeah.
or sexual thoughts. I mean, I was very innocent. I didn't know about these things. And so I never really had much to say.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if you said you were thinking about boys or whatever, you almost had to confess to her.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back, none of these women were qualified in spiritual direction. They were just because Escriva said that God spoke to them, that they had this God-given right. So you had to tell them about your work, and I can't remember what I used to really talk about. I think I used to make it up in the end, but I was hugely uncomfortable about this chat. Um, um, I think I used to talk about maybe some of the others and what they were doing and stuff like that. But Escriva said in this chat, and I used it to my advantage, the first thing is that you were to talk about your impure thoughts, and a chat was only to take 10 minutes, right?
Right.
But I used to find I was in there for an hour and a half with somebody that I didn't like, a numerary that I didn't like, most of them.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd be saying, "Tell us what you're thinking. Tell us what you're thinking." Um,
Wow.
and what are your thoughts? And I would say, no, I just completely clam up. But anyway, one day, I think it was around the time of the Battenberg incident, after the 10 minutes, I got up and walked out. And they said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Well, the father said it was only to be 10 minutes. And then I locked myself into a store. And there was ructions, but I kind of used it I started to get clever in the end, but it was very uncomfortable. Yeah, so yeah, everything, they tried to control absolutely everything. Yeah, and it wasn't nice. I know our rooms were searched, our post was read, our incoming and our outgoing post was read, our phone calls were listened to. It was just high control, um, micromanaged at every point.
And I don't
Yeah.
think it's no wonder that you had these sort of explosive outbursts of emotion. I mean, I don't even think you could nail it down to a single one. I think it was just a wealth of these emotions that had been suppressed, for however long. They came bubbling out of you whenever you were in these very unjust and unfair situations. And I think throughout your book, the injustice of what you specifically as becoming a member, but also the other students who were in this quote unquote cookery course with you, what you guys were put through, just the injustice of it all and the unfairness of it all. It made me feel so angry on your behalf. It made me feel like I wanted to like reach through the pages and do something about it to make it stop, because it was just, I mean, a couple of things that stood out to me when you talked about how after you served the higher class members their nice dinner and everything, you were taken basically down to a basement and you sat like on some like rinky dink little chairs and a table and had like tin silverware that you ate off of, and then what you were eating were literally the table scraps
Mhm.
from the people upstairs. Like it wasn't some food you'd made and set aside while you were making this for everyone else. No, it came back from the table back to you, and that
That
was
was
what you
served
ate.
that shows, yeah. Yeah, that I remember it was being said very, very explicitly by a numerary one day, and I was an assistant numerary. She said that the assistant numeraries eat the leftovers, and that was a policy. And I think there was a class system there in
Mm-hmm.
a under the same roof, that that was set in stone by a scriba.
Mm-hmm.
He said, never leave those women alone. They were us, the assistant numeraries, because they have their own mentality.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what that meant, I don't know. Well, I think I know what it means, that we were uneducated, that we were common, that we were rough around the edges, we were unsophisticated, and and that was borne out by the way that we were treated, and so yeah, it was so horrible to live under that regime, and to know that they were looking at you thinking that you were, like, they called us bad apples, they called us muck savages, which is a particular Irish term. We were called culchies, which is another Irish term. I mean, horrible names, and you couldn't answer back because um, there's fraternal correction. You know about what fraternal correction is. It's a
Yes.
behavioral technique, a control technique that they used. So when they said this to us, you couldn't say, don't call me that you're crossing a boundary. That is so wrong. And they would laugh. And they're horrible terms now here in Ireland.
Of course.
Yeah, they're horrible terms. So a journalist actually told me something recently that kind of said it all. He was speaking to a numerary many, many years ago about the assistant numeraries, and she said, he said, but like what you did was so wrong, keeping them as servants and cleaners and so on. And she said, but we saved their souls.
Of course. Of course. You can
And
justify anything that you want if you are doing it on the behalf of some sort of divine authority. And that
yeah,
is Opus Dei's entire shtick, in my opinion.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. But I just thought, wow, they must have thought that we were, but this was all by a scriva. This was all came down from a scriva, and they're following his diktats word for word. There was the whole acting like little girls because we were his little daughters. Now,
Yes, the immature
that,
behavior.
that was particularly demeaning, and it was just horrible. Um, we had to behave, in an infantile manner. When you did, you got the approval of the directresses. I think we were all the time seeking the approval of the directresses, and they would
Mm-hmm.
encourage it. So it would be quite common for women. I think I mentioned it in the book, that there was somebody that when they saw a black person or a person of color, that they would freak out, and that was
Yes.
encouraged. And you'd hear about this, people, women in their 40s skipping along the corridor, um, the kind of in cutesy behavior, very, very hard to witness.
Mm-hmm.
unbelievable to think back that this was encouraged. And I did it. I actually have to admit, I did it myself because I wanted that acceptance, giggling and laughing and hiding behind people and stuff like that. Very, very hard to shake off when I left. That's,
I imagine all of that, like everything that you kind of had programmed into you, that to deprogram after that is, I'm sure, a very, very tough thing to
yeah,
do.
we were told, I remember clearly being told that when somebody does something wrong, that the Opus Dei will always stick up, that they will they will cover up.
That's right.
Um, yeah,
They
that so
carry
if somebody
water for each other and like protect each other, basically.
protect each other, and if they broke the law, that they would cover for them. I I remember, and I can tell you who told me and where and when.
Hmm.
And I found that absolutely remarkable. But I witnessed it.
Hmm.
I witnessed it. Something that happened, and they stood by that person,
Hmm.
come hell or high water. You could see, looking back now, they didn't like her, but they stood by her because she was a member of Opus Dei. So
Interesting.
yeah, I remember that extremely clearly.
So
Yeah,
the group think, the encouraged group think that exists in this organization, it was very much like in full force there.
in full force, 100%. And they said, we will back each other up no matter what, even if the law is broken.
Wow. And I mean, I am a fan of taking Opus Dei at their word when they say things, because I think over time they've had had a bad habit of saying the quiet part out loud, and when they have done that, I have paid attention. And for example, in the 2023 international complaint, it was reported that Opus Dei will cede without conceding when in regard to any type of effort to reform the organization on the part of the Vatican. I've also read numerous accounts from people saying that there is an attitude that you don't go against the group, you don't go against the whole, you the individual, you don't have an identity outside of the whole, which is why once you leave, you cease to exist, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So yeah, and that's the very hard part. I think I gave, I remember at the time trying to rationalize it and saying, look, I gave God the best part of the best years of my life. But I naively thought that I could still be in contact with them, and that I could especially be in contact with my assistant numerary sisters, even though I had seen the others leave and they never got in touch. But I wasn't allowed. You're blanked out of their history. Your name is never mentioned. So I spoke to somebody who's left recently, and I said, "Was my name ever mentioned?" They said, "Your name was never mentioned."
Of course not. Of
But
course
there was
not.
one or two that never forgot you, but which is nice to hear. I remember afterwards I worked with an order of nuns called the Mercy Order there, and every year they have a mass for their ex-members.
Mm.
And these ex-nuns come back with their husbands and their children, and sometimes their grandchildren.
Wow.
And there's a big supper, and everyone came out. And I remember I was the chef and I cooked for them. I mean, it was a real privilege. And the love and the caring, and some of the nuns were godmothers to the children. I mean, it was beautiful. And in comparison to Opus Dei, where you're defamed, you're told, what they say about you is that you chose to live an immoral life. That you've, I think one former assistant numerary told me that they said that she had ran off with the milkman. There was all, crazies, but that you're blanked, you're you're just taken away, you're completely forgotten about. That was very hard to take for a long time, but
Of
I think that
course.
they remember me. I think they remember me now.
I think they probably remember you too. In fact, I doubt they ever forgot you half as well as they would like you to think that they did. And I suppose we should talk about your exit from this organization, and what led up to that, because really there are some extraordinary set of circumstances around how you got out, particularly with your family. So I would love to hear
Yeah.
you tell that story because I absolutely love it.
Okay, thank you so much. So I think it all started to kick off around 1981, and I mean kick off. And I think Cardinal Basil Hume in England, in the UK, he issued a diktat, or an order, basically, that Opus Dei in the UK was not to recruit minors.
Right.
Under whatever, I can't remember exactly, but minors. So I had a very dear aunt who was a nun in the UK, and I think there had been a BBC program, and of course BBC is a very, very reputable media outlet, and I think she had got the whole minutes of the show. She wrote, anyway, sent them home to my dad and said, "This is what's after happening." That they're recruiting minors. I think it was Irish parents had gone to him and said their daughters had just disappeared. So anyway, he issued that, and my dad's back got up. So dad wanted me home. At this stage, I had finished the course, and I was in a place called Lismullen, which to me was akin to a prison.
It
And I've
sounded
worked in
very
prisons.
dark. It sounded very dark from the way you wrote about it in your book, like not a place where joy could be
It
found.
was not. We lived and worked in this place all the time. You know, you might get out once a month for an afternoon or whatever, but it was constant work, constant pressure. And I was doing a thing called the Centre of Studies, which was an intense 2-year training course to be an assistant numerary. I mean, what they taught us was basic catechetics. I mean, it was all very rudimentary. We actually got a class on how to shower.
What?
Yeah. Yeah.
Replete with the reminder to use the cold water, I assume.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. But we had been to Rome, a bunch of us assistant numeraries, and I think this is on anyway. We had been to Rome on a trip. We'd been quite warm. We didn't have the proper clothing or the cosmetics, because remember, everything was and I remember we didn't have money to buy water or anything like that. So, and I remember the clothes were donated, and they were wool skirts and wool jumpers, and we had very little. We were there for 10 days, and keep in mind, it was a unique conference. It was a recruitment campaign. That's what it was. So we went there, and I did enjoy going to Rome because we got away from the cleaning and the thing. But anyway, so we came back from Rome, and there was a fraternal correction came from Villa Seghetti that the Irish assistant numeraries were grubby. So then what happened then, there was a whole, it was very, very patronizing, very condescending, that we were brought in, and a numerary came in, and she showed us, there was a class on how to put shower gel and where to put it.
Wow.
And I mean, keep in mind, some of the assistant numeraries were very clean ladies. They were very dignified women, you know, and there was nothing about that we had the wrong clothing, or we didn't have the right cosmetics, or we didn't have money to buy water. That didn't come into it. It was because we were country girls, you know. So anyway, I went home for this week. My father, I went home for the week, and I think my parents, I remember during that time, there was a fire here in Ireland, and 43 children of my peers got killed in a fire called the Stardust Tragedy. All right. So I remember going back, and I remember being very sad over this. And there was a poem in the paper, but from one of the victims to another victim that had been left, and it was beautiful. And I remember saying it, and they said, I remember not so nice things were said about those victims, that they were there committing mortal sin and they won't go to heaven and all that. So I just remember the penny was beginning to drop, that this wasn't all it was cracked up to be. So I started asking questions, but on the outside, my parents started to fight, especially my dad, with the directors of Opus Dei to get me home. So then my health started to suffer, and then my dad got 2 bishops involved. I won't mention the names now, they're both deceased. One of them wrote to me, and I never got the letter because it was deemed as unsuitable from the bishop. And then another bishop came to see me, and I remember the evening he called, I broke out in a rash head to toe. I was brought into a room by numeraries for 2 days before that. They knew he was coming tomorrow, but for 2 days I was coached on what to say to him. every single word was I was told what to say to him. So he came in, and I remember he wasn't a particularly pleasant man, and he was very cross with me. I received no kindness from him at all. But he, when he came out, then he said, "I'm not impressed.
Wow.
I'm not impressed with them." So then they said back to me that he said he was very impressed. It was so
Interesting.
he then wrote to my parents and told my parents that he felt that I was under immense pressure, which I suppose was one good thing. So then my parents tried to get me to come home. I remember my mother rang and said, "Come home by Saturday." I then went to the numerary and I said, "I have to be home by Saturday." And she screaming into my face, "Are you going to throw away your vocation? You're going to curl up like a little kitten?" So my mother rang me then the next night and she said, "Are you coming home on Saturday?" And of course I was primed.
Mm-hmm.
I started shouting back at her, and they surrounded me in a circle, praying the rosary. I now know that there was an extension that all of my calls were listened to, but I would still be queried afterwards as to what was said. So it was just.
Wow.
So then the night the bishop came, they were in the oratory praying, and two of the numeraries were outside the door listening to the conversation. So I mean, it was just everything was coordinated and
Mm-hmm.
spied on and staged and everything. So then my dad then said, "I want you have to come home." They wanted me home before my 21st birthday. I remember before that I was brought to the dentist and to the optician.
Really?
I had never been to the optician before. I had never been to the dentist. And I think they brought an Opus Dei doctor to check me out as well.
Why
So
then of all times?
because I suppose they wanted me to go home to my family and say, "Oh, I'm being looked after," because we weren't looked after. We weren't cared for in any shape or
Yes.
form. But I remember getting up in the morning, and the date was set for me to go home. And they got up, and the two numeraries said, "We'll go down instead. You're to stay here."
Wow.
So they went down and they visited various sections of my family, but never said, "We went to see your aunt," or "We went to see." That came out afterwards, and that absolutely, there was war. My parents were fuming. So then another couple of months went by, and my father said, "You're to come home. That's it. Or we're going to go up and get you." So they said, "Your father is to write a letter. You're to ask your father to write a letter to say that he will not keep you down at home." So I wrote to Dad. I did what they told me, and I'm so ashamed of this, but I did what they told me. I wrote to Dad and said, "Please, Dad, will you write back and tell me you're not going to keep me?" So he wrote back and he said, "I will not try and keep you." That's what he wrote back. Very, very clever.
Mm-hmm.
So
Wise choice of words.
wise choice of words. So I always remember, I can live through every moment of getting up that day to go down. So I was in Lismullen, and it was a 7.5 hour drive at the time. I drove with a supernumerary and a numerary member of Opus Dei. And I remember we read the life of St. Catherine of Siena on the way down. And we did the 15 we said the 15 decades of the Rosary. I had mass and all that morning, and I had to keep in mind before I went, the advisory had from Opus Dei in Ireland had come to visit me, which is just an enormous privilege apparently, and priests, and they had I had gone into convent. So I went down, and I remember arriving into the house. It was a Saturday in 1983, in November 1983. And I remember my parents were very cross, and there was no airs and graces. The bone china wasn't brought out, and the nice biscuits. There was nothing like that. And there was these members of Opus Dei were to stay in a bed and breakfast nearby, and they said, "We'll see you. We'll pick you up tomorrow morning."
Mm-hmm.
And my mum and dad stood on either side of me. They said, "She's not going back." And so I was given £50, 50 Irish pounds, and I was to keep it in my bra, and that was to run away, right? If they kept me, that was what I was told. So I started screaming and said, I want to go back. I want to follow my vocation. I did all of that. I played the part, and then they left. My dad ran them and said, don't come back. We don't want you here. You're never to go near her again. And they put me down on the couch and said, you're going nowhere. You're going nowhere. So I deep down, it took me many years to realize that there was relief.
Mm.
It took me many years to realize. But so then, as far as my parents were concerned, I was out of Opus Dei. But in my head, I was still in Opus Dei. And because I believed what they told me, I now know I was not a member of Opus Dei because of the dicastery of clergy. I realised that,
The Code of Canon Law.
Code of Canon Law, I didn't know that. And I mean, I haven't even started to deal with the enormity of that lie, of that fraud.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
That is major.
That is major. I mean, but I continued to live as an assistant numerary in my head, but it started to crumble fairly quickly. I remember going to a bar with my brother and having a small glass of beer. And I was different. I looked different. I dressed differently. I spoke differently. And I was in my small village. I was of huge interest,
I'm sure.
People were very kind to me, and they surrounded me, people that I didn't necessarily know, and they looked after me. And I will forever grateful for that. And people would tell me I was very interesting, and that I had a lot of opinions, but sure, they were all pro-life and pro anti-divorce and
Of
all of that.
course.
But and I had a certain view of politics as well, because Opus Dei talked about politics and all that. All of that's changed.
Uh-huh.
I suppose from that November 1983 until March the 19th, 1985, I technically, in my mind, I was an assistant numerary. I remember I was home maybe 4 or 5 months, and I kind of knew I didn't want to go back. So I wrote to them and I asked them, could I be a supernumerary? All hell broke loose. All hell broke
Really?
loose. They started to come down to visit me and trying to demand me to go back. You're 21 now, you're an adult, you're to come back. They contacted me the day after my 21st and said, you're an adult now, when are you coming back? Your
Wow.
parents can't tell you what to do. When you come back, we're going to pick you up.
Wow.
And so, no, my parents would have been, I wasn't going to go back. That was it. So then it took maybe another 8 months before I actually said, I don't want to stay in Opus Dei. And that was when I was in a hospital. I was on an appointment, and I had distanced myself from them. No, they had tracked me down. They had followed me. They had stalked me. They had contacted family and friends. They had tried everything. But I went to an appointment, and I don't know how they knew I was there. It was in a public hospital. I was sitting in the waiting room, and a numerary came in, and she was fuming. And she came down, and I said, how did you know I was here? No, she said, I rang up and pretended to be you.
Wow. That's
Mm-hmm.
sneaky. That's really, really that's like to even think to do that, to get information means that your like mindset is already at a certain place. I feel.
Yeah, yeah. So she said, and as if she had the right to do it, but this is, like the time that I was accused of this, and not that I was accused of, but the finger was pointed at me for the stealing. It was like they had this God-given right to say and do whatever they wanted. I mean, previous to that, they had rang up a workplace that I was in, and I didn't want to speak to them, but they said that they were revenue,
Wow.
Anyway, yeah. So I remember she tried, I tried to get up and go. And she said, there's a car waiting outside to bring you to confession. There's a priest waiting in a church, an Opus Dei priest, and because you're living an immoral and sinful life.
Wow.
So she tried pulling me into the car or out of the room, and I held onto the wall, and I wouldn't go. And I started to shout, and she said, "Stop shouting! Everyone's looking at you."
Once again, pointing the finger at you, not at the cause of the entire situation, which was her tracking you down like some kind of creepy stalker to a medical appointment of all things.
Yeah,
That is
yeah.
insane.
Insane. So I then we sat down eventually, and I was very, very upset. And so then she said to me, "Are you thinking about leaving Opus Dei?" And that was my first time saying, "I am thinking about leaving Opus Dei." So she said, "You should write to the father and tell him that you're thinking about leaving Opus Dei." So I did. I did it just to get her away. So she
Yeah.
left. I never saw that numerary again. But um, I now know there was no need for any of that. I mean, so then I started to get clever. I started to lie to them, and
Mhm.
I had an idea where the information was coming from about my whereabouts. So I started to drop little fibs, and I kind of, but they still tracked me down.
Mhm.
But I started to um, I suppose, charm them myself. And
Mhm.
I first time that I really realized that they were talking rubbish. I have another Irish term that I could use, but I'm not. That they were factually incorrect. And I remember challenging this numerary. I agreed to do the spiritual chat um, with this numerary, and she was talking about something, and I said, "But that's not true." And she looked at me, and it was the first time I realized that they were completely ill-informed about a huge amount of stuff. At this stage, I had gone back to education. I was, and they said they'd support, if I went back, they'd support me through education. But I now know from another source that at that time they had a whole new plan in place for me, and that was to get me back as an associate. And
Interesting.
they had a house ready for me and everything for me to live in, but to be an associate. Now, I didn't know that at the time.
Interesting. Why do you
In,
think that that was what they were gonna, was it a bone that they were kind of throwing you to try to get you to come back?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Uh, but I only found that out recently enough. So then I kind of I managed to kind of I played the game for a while,
Mm.
and I played the game for a while, and then next thing, the 19th of March came, 1985, and they rang me at my workplace and said to me, very matter of fact, "Did you renew your vocation as an assistant numerary to Opus Dei yesterday, or it was the following day?" And I just remember midnight that night and knowing that I was out of Opus Dei.
Uh-huh.
And I had been living this double life. The double life was now over. And there was the assistant numerary part, and then the other part was actually quite good.
Mhm.
I had started to buy clothes and go out to parties and go to see bands, and it was beginning to get exciting.
Yes.
But I remember then just that freedom. So she rang me, and I said, I didn't renew, and I laughed. But that was pure nerves. And then she was I could hear she was cross. And then she said to me, I said, can I ring my farmer? Can I ring the assistant numeraries? And she said, "It's better not."
Wow.
And she hung up, and that was it, really. Now, the odd time I rang an assistant numerary and just said, "This is," and they have a quick chat, but I kind of stopped that then. I never heard from them really again after that. But then I was fine for a while. There was the whole honeymoon period, there was the excitement of life and being able to be normal. But then I began to realize that I had a lot of, I wasn't able to socialize, I wasn't able to communicate. I was heavily traumatized, and I found, Opus Dei had said, "There's no need to go and see a counselor, you need to go to confession. Counseling is wrong," and all that. So I used to go to confession, and the one thing that kept me on the straight and narrow was education.
Mm-hmm.
Education, 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 and then at the same time here in Ireland, clerical abuse started to come out. Um,
Yeah.
And then the Magdalen laundry scandal emerged. And then, of course, I was in the prison service. And with all of that, I think my understanding of my own abuse started to emerge. So, which is in prison, I learned about prisoners' rights. And by learning about prisoners' rights, I learned about my own human rights and how they were breached by Opus Dei under the International Code of Human Rights. Or a colleague of mine had it in his office, and I used to go in and look. And every now and then I'd be able to identify. It was a different stages. My first one was my breaches of human rights as a woman, as a human being. Then my breaches of human rights that were against me as a woman, and then as a child. All different, and it was quite profound. And then because of the abuses here in Ireland, the emergent, and how it was dealt with, I began to realize about the religious abuse that was imposed on me by Opus Dei. So huge learning there. But then one day I got up after about 20 years and I was okay, and then a chaplain in the prison that I was working in, she said to me one day, "Tell me your story." She had recognized something in me, and I told her my story, and she said, "Would it help to speak to ex-members?" And I said, "I'm the only one that left." She said, "No, you're not. I know plenty." So she put me in contact with an ex-member of Opus Dei. I met her. She was heavily traumatized. So then she told me of the ones that left. So I went looking for former assistant numeraries, just because I found that conversation, it was just one conversation, I found that immensely healing. Yeah. So I said, I need to find ex-assistant numerary. So I started looking and I found 2 Irish ones. Now that took a while, took a lot of research, and we met, and together talking about our experiences has been transformative. We could talk about it, we could laugh about it, we could cry about it, and we meet and we tell the same stories over and over again because they're still hugely traumatizing.
Yes.
But it's been immensely healing. So now there's 6 of us.
Wow.
Irish assistant numeraries, yeah. And many of them are in the public eye. There's Tina Fogarty and Claudine Maguire. There's Sheila and Margaret Joyce as well, and one or two others as well. So, and then we went to the Financial Times, which was huge. And of course, I'm in contact with the 43 in Argentina, and many others across the world. All of the Zooms that we have, the Agora, and all the good work that you're doing is connecting us all, helping us all heal, and understand each other's experiences and support each other. So yeah, so it's been a bit of a journey, but Opus Dei will be listening to this. I am not going to stop talking. I'm not going to stop telling what happened to us.
Knowledge is power, and the truth will set you free.
Yeah, 150%. Yeah. So that's that. Yeah.
What an incredible story. What an incredible journey. I have so much adoration for the lengths that your parents went to get you out when they realized that you needed to come out of that situation. Your father's very wise choice of words. I mean, he was obviously a very, very smart man, and that is just an incredible, the lengths that they went to help you get out, help you find your life again, and start living as a human being instead of as a robot. All of that is just exemplary, and you for what you've come through and how you've, like I said, managed to turn this into something that can be positive, and you've started to connect with people. And I think that out of all of this, for my part, learning about the horrible experiences that you and other former members have had, the one very constant, very true silver lining through it all has been that I've been able to connect with and also help people connect with other people who have been through these things, understand, care, want to do something about it. And also it's allowed me to connect with people like you, who, I like I said, are just incredible human beings with true strength and true like fortitude. And as a young person making my way in the world, I look up to that. I look up to these stories, and the strength and the resilience that you and others have shown, and it is a guiding light. So thank you for telling this story. I know it cannot be easy, but thank
Mm.
you.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem at all. And thank you for all of your work. I think a special mention as well to a couple of other people, like Eileen Johnson in the UK. She's been a lone female in the English speaking world that has tried to get these
Yes.
experiences out there, and all credit due to Eileen. And of course, Gareth Gore's book has been absolutely remarkable.
Yes.
He endorsed my book, I'm thrilled to bits that he did that. It's a real honor. But all of the ex-members as well that are speaking out, you know, uh, they're very, very brave. But I have to say, and I know Opus Dei will be just, we're not afraid anymore. We're not
Mhm.
afraid of you. But we're not going to obey you anymore.
Absolutely not.
And hopefully, Pope Leo will do the right thing, whatever that is.
But
You know,
regardless, at the end of the day, that has no impact on you and your decision not to support something that is clearly harmful. Um,
yes,
we
yeah,
don't need the permission of a pontiff to be able to decide for ourselves that that's not something that we need to support.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I think
yeah,
that the
absolutely.
reason why I bring that up is because I know that Opus Dei has done a lot of work to equate the organization with the Catholic Church in a way that's sort of inextricable, to where any
Yeah.
sort of criticism of the organization is inherently a criticism of the Catholic Church, and that needs to that needs to be put like separated 100%.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a pure manipulation. I mean, it's a pure manipulation of the facts. I mean, Opus Dei, they see themselves as separate and above the church,
Mm-hmm.
but yet they market themselves as being part, that we're criticizing the church. And I think it's, pure manipulation, but we see through it,
Yes.
and, I think it's particularly disgusting, really. But look, um, we do see through their tactics.
Absolutely.
I've been there. I've been on the inside. They've told, they informed us what their tactics are, and we can see them from the outside. You
Mm-hmm.
know, so, yeah,
So, if there is a young person listening to this now who maybe they're being approached by someone who's in Opus Dei, or maybe they have family members and they're being encouraged to start participating, do you have any words of wisdom for a young person who's in that situation?
run the other way as fast as you can. I think it's a different experience though for somebody that has parents or family in Opus Dei. But I mean, if you've never come across Opus Dei before, and somebody from Opus Dei has contacted you, I would speak to an adult
Mm-hmm.
completely separate from that person, or a couple of adults. And I would say to any child that's in contact with Opus Dei, fully inform your parents. Never be afraid to tell your parents, because that's the mistake I made. I didn't tell my parents. Tell your parents if you are unsure of anything, especially if a member of Opus Dei is in contact with you. And then I'm not so sure if I am best suited to give advice to somebody who has family in Opus Dei. I actually wouldn't know how to, because that's a completely different situation, and the pressure is so immense.
Yes.
It's very, very sad. I'm reading some of the testimonies on Opus Dei Exposed and on Opus Libros, and it's shocking. I really wouldn't be a best place for advice there, but I think some very specialized advice needs to be sought in a situation like that. It's very sad.
I think I would tell anyone in that situation, the pressure is very real, and I do recognize that. But if you have any access to information, if you have access to the internet, if you can get to a public library, um, do
Yeah,
some independent research on your own, even if it's hard, even if it feels like you're committing treason against something holy. Do that for your own sake, so that you don't end up in a situation that isn't right for you. Because at the end of the
yeah,
day, that's what it really should be about. A true and authentic vocation is right for the person, and it will be very clear. You
Yeah.
won't have to wonder about it. You won't be stuck sitting up late at night questioning if it's authentic or real. You will know.
Yeah. 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 100%. And I think that's great advice, really. But yeah. Yeah. That's
Well,
good advice.
I've had your book on display behind me this entire time. It's in very good company. It's sitting with, of course, Opus by Gareth Gore and Inside Opus Dei by Maria del Carmen Tapia. The
Oh, yeah.
Truth, The Whole Truth and Nothing But the Truth by Peter Saunders, who's an incredible human rights activist. You are in good company, and I'm going to link it. Yes, I'm going to link it down below for anyone who would be interested in purchasing a copy. And if anyone would like to connect with you, follow your work, because you have a whole business that you run. Where can people connect with you?
They can connect with me on LinkedIn, and then I'm an executive coach and AMA Coaching Solutions on Instagram.
And I will
So
link
I'd be
those down below as well.
no problem whatsoever. And just thank you to everybody that has listened to this podcast, and spread the word. This must stop.
Thank you so much for being with me here today. This has been absolutely amazing. I'm so honored.
Right, listen, thank you very much. Thanks a million.
If you enjoyed this episode or found it helpful or transformative in any way, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing if you haven't already. Maybe share it with someone that you know who you think might enjoy it. A big thank you to Anne-Marie for sharing her experiences and story with me. If you know of someone that you think I should talk to, feel free to direct them my way. My contact details are in the description of this episode. Because of the heaviness of the topics that I focus on, I want to make sure and remind everyone listening that if you or someone that you know is in need of mental health support, I have linked a variety of mental health sources down in the description of this episode. Life is hard, but we do not have to go at it totally alone or unequipped. If you need help, please reach out. Also, remember that details to learn more about my work, connect with me on social media, or support my endeavors are all linked down below. If you like to read, consider checking out my Substack channel called Beck Griffin and the Deep Dive Project, where I have been publishing shorter articles inspired by my work and research. Also, don't forget that in addition to YouTube, you can also find the Deep Dive Project on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Rumble, and basically anywhere podcasts live. If you listen there, please be sure to leave a 5-star rating, a review, or a comment, because it helps the Deep Dive Project reach more people. If you feel like hanging around, go check out some of the other playlists and content over on the community tab on my channel. Thank you for being here, and remember, nolite te bastardes carborundorum. Don't let the bastards drag you down.